Morning everyone, welcome to the Bath Life Business Surgery about digital transformation with Ojo Solutions. Hello, and I hope this finds you well. My name is Greg and this is our latest Bath Life Business Surgery. And the aim of these surgeries is to provide free, helpful, practical advice on all aspects of businesses, all aspects of trying to run a business in these strange times. We're looking for smart thinking as we emerge from the Great Pause. Two developing trends. One is that businesses are pivoting to new models, not just running Zoom, but figuring out new ways to reach their clients and customers. And we'll hear how Ojo itself has been going through this process. It is its own case study in that respect. And this also includes our own Bath Life Business Clubs and surgeries. These surgeries will continue virtually, and please talk to us if you have a professional service which will help Bath's businesses. The business clubs, sponsored by Mojers Druitt, will be virtual until the new year. We're not quite sure of the date when we will return, but we will be back in the Royal Crescent Hotel and Spa for fresh thinking over a fine lunch. And we'll all look forward to that, I'm sure. It'd be great to get together again. The other trend is that for all the uncertainty and all the mysteries and difficulties and oddities of these times, we're all just getting on with it. Yes, we have to plot and plan and strategize and attempt to interpret government guidelines and figure out what any form of return to work in a physical sense might mean in the coming weeks and so on. But mainly, it's time for action. Time to get back out there and just give it a proper go. Just play the cards we have and do as best we can in these times. And who knows how this is going to play out with the incredible resilience of Bath as a city, with the beautifully inventive nature of so many of Bath's entrepreneurs. We think the city is set fair in these current times. In that vein, we're delighted to say, of course, that Bath Life is back on August 28th, which is just a week on Friday. It is not far away at all. We've got a great first issue back, and thank you to all the companies who will be back with us then too. Also, look out for the Creative Bath Awards on Thursday, the 27th of August, the night before we're back with Bath Life. And Ojo has been a great supporter of Creative Bath. The process is pay what you fancy. There's trust. There's pivoting as a business model. The sector of the creative, tech and cultural sector is so important for Bath's economy, and we've been delighted over the years to promote it through Creative Bath. It's an opportunity, of course, to celebrate creativity, but to bring all the businesses of Bath together in that endeavour as well, because one way or another, it's a key driver of our economy. So yes, please look out for Bath Life again. There'll be a spectacular cover and some amazing content, and yes, excellent support so far from companies. On to today's Bath Life Business Surgery. I'll be interviewing on your behalf two speakers from Ojo Solutions, and we'll bring in questions during it. So use the Q&A button you'll see at the bottom of your screens, and they can be anonymous if it's at all sensitive. It may be people sometimes are quite cautious about revealing they may not know all there is to know about tech. Well, actually, that's why we've got this surgery, because the Ojo duo will enlighten us greatly, I'm sure. Let's bring forward our two speakers, and I'll just introduce them formally. So, Nathan Baranowski, Managing Director at Ojo. Nathan, are you with us? There you are. If you could unmute yourself, sir. You look muted. Very good.
I am, yes. Hiya.
Very good. So, Nathan, MD at Ojo, which focuses on transforming organisations through technology, a strong strategic leader with 15 years more experience in business improvement and pioneering technology adoption across a wide range of sectors, from charities to fintech. A great passion for tech, as we shall shortly hear, I'm sure. And Joe, a more recent joiner, heads the marketing and customer experience team, has over 25 years of marketing and commercial knowledge and experience. She's undertaken transformation change roles in a variety of sectors: food, non-food, FMCG, consumer durables, health, wellness and social care, charities, from FTSE 100 through to SMEs and startups working in the UK and abroad and beyond. So Ojo as a business, let's just set the scene for who you are, what you do and what has changed. Nathan, just talk us through that part.
Sure. So we're an organisation who help businesses of all shapes and sizes, as you say, from charities all the way through to large multi-international corporations and startups, in understanding how to use technology effectively to meet their business needs. So that's everything from digital strategies, building websites, simple brochure sites, all the way through to complex integration. So at the moment, for example, we're just finishing off a project delivering a digital banking solution for a credit union. Our world is one very much around tech and understanding the digital landscape, and then uniquely knitting things together. So our world is about joining dots, if you like, in the digital sense, and allowing them then to produce an outcome which helps to realize a goal. That could be more efficiency, that could be engaging more with customers, or building a completely new business model that doesn't exist.
Let's understand what your sort of core competence are, core offerings, but also what you don't quite do, if that makes sense. So what's just beyond the reach of you as a business that you perhaps partner with others
Sure.
and so on? What don't you do that's similar?
Yeah, so we're not an IT business in terms of we don't offer software, or we don't really provide services in relation to licenses in those areas. Our world is very much in relation to building software. So our core is understanding a business problem and then building either a web site or web app, if you like, or a native application that sits on a device. Most of our work is in the B2B world, so building software that enables organizations to be more efficient and effective in the back office, if you like, over the front office. And our core is in doing that for businesses sort of in the medium enterprise. So those that want to compete in the global market, we do a lot of work in those areas in order to support that.
And taking your sense of yourself as almost a case study, it's like physician heal thyself. So what you've been doing, and more particularly doing differently since the middle of March.
Yeah, so interestingly, you think a digital business that we live in a world where everything is virtualized. Actually, one of the really important things when you're running and building software is that you sit close together. The agile methodology that we all in the tech world use is all about bringing teams together. And one of the biggest shifts has been using solutions like Zoom and Teams in order to build a way of being able to run workshops, being able to deliver those, but also obviously like everyone else, our entire team is dispersed now and working from home. And that's been a real big shift for us in terms of understanding how we can work. And how we can do that effectively, but also running a workshop typically where we would be whiteboarding with a client. Actually trying to do that digitally isn't quite as simple as you would want, and there's still a very good case in point for a pen and a sheet of paper in order to support that. So being able to do that effectively and find tools to be able to do that. The other side of it is our whole world is one of being able to effectively network and engage with clients and meet with clients, and that just basically disappeared in March. So for the last 5 months, it's been very much a very different world, and really pivoting our organization to recognize the importance of digital as a channel. So, our website is an afterthought in our world. It's not a priority in terms of what we need in terms of as a channel. And now it is going to need to be the core channel. And that's something that we've been working on significantly in order to.
But let's come back to that in a sec. I'd like to bring in Joe on this, on the comms really of how you've been able to communicate with clients. There's a physical issue that you haven't been able to do the whiteboarding and the brainstorming quite the same way. But how have you approached that comms with clients, both existing and perhaps new as well? Joe?
Yes, as you say, it's been a change. So people that we already work with, it's been picking up the phone. It's been, talking to them from day one when the lockdown started. So a lot of them, their organizations meant that they needed to pivot really quickly. Many of them were, for example, supporting people with care needs. So actually they needed to be able to get online very quickly and virtualize what they were doing. So for us, it was a case of supporting them as well as supporting our own needs. So it was keeping in touch, keeping the conversation going, whether that was a virtual Teams call or a phone call. We kept that going and made sure that everyone was able to do what they needed to do. From our own perspective, very quickly, we weren't able to have the sort of breakfast and networking events that everyone else, I guess, as well is used to doing. So that meant for us keeping in touch quite regularly. So scheduling in calls, scheduling in virtual meetings, seeing what people were in need of. And many people in those first few months of lockdown very much needed support. How did they actually, in the case of, say, cerebral palsy Cymru, who we were supporting at the time, they needed to very much get online very quickly with the children they care for and their families and carry on the care they've been delivering. And very much needed support to do that. So, over a number of weeks, we helped them as a team get together and speak together and also deliver the care they needed to do.
And we'll come on to the charities and also the slightly more general point about tech for good and tech with a sense of purpose. But I guess also for many businesses, this last 6 months has been a time of saying, well, you know what, we'll just put that on hold because we're just figuring things out. Have you had that? Have you had sort of contracts postponed or delayed at any rate as people are just simply uncertain?
Very much, yes. I think a lot of people on the 16th of March just literally, as you said, they went into a big pause. Some people did literally pause, really take stock and think about where they were, and started to really change the way that they looked at their business. They did do a big pivot. They had to adapt certain things, and they realized very quickly that this was turning into a very much low touch, no touch kind of world, and digital first was going to be a big priority. And actually that meant sitting down and talking to various people about what that meant for them and how they were going to make sure that their new world of digital was being built into their business continuity. So an awful lot of people started to take stock over those first few months. I think others took a bit of time and actually stood back and started to look at their business. They know they needed to do something, not quite sure what, and how are they going to do that in a very sort of efficient and effective way to make sure that the people that they serve, be it customer, patient, supporter of charity, how are they going to make sure that what they did was still at the core of what they needed to be. So again, a lot of people just started to think, started to to have conversations, started to say, where do I need to go next? And how do I maybe start to think about this new virtual and physical world? How do I start to adapt so that when the time is right, I can probably still have both and give my customer a real seamless experience?
Well, that sense of adapting, tell us either really, just tell us a little bit about you as a business in terms of your own return to work. Are you expecting broadly to have the same amount of time in wherever the office may be? Because I know you've been talking about moving to Bath. From Bradford-on-Avon, or is it going to be, if not quite as distributed as currently, but far more distributed than previously in terms of working from home?
Yes,
sure. Do you want to go, Jo? You can. You go.
Yeah, for me, I joined Ojo literally 2 weeks before the lockdown. So for me, I had a very short amount of time to get to know the team face to face. And I think, we've all realized that working from home has its benefits, and there are things as well that we all miss. So I think in the future, probably like an awful lot of businesses, there will be a real, determination to have some face-to-face contact again when we need to have that. But actually remote working has its benefits. And I genuinely believe that we will continue to do a bit of a hybrid of the two. But yeah, I think a lot of people are looking forward to having some more face-to-face time as and when they need to, and as it will benefit either the business or clients.
And Nathan, when it comes managerially, pretty much everyone in business has learned to trust more. Whatever their level of trust was, it has had to increase because you can't have the equivalent of management by wandering around or whatever. Albeit I have heard of some sort of slightly more invasive cameras sort of checking up on people, which sounds like a very weird world. But Nathan, managerially, from your point of view, how would you expect that to change going forward in terms of how you actually engage with your team?
Yeah, so I guess kind of the slight benefit for us in that regard is that we can support through our agile methodology. So we kind of agree what we're doing on a day, and then people report back on a day. So through lockdown, we've been running on a morning and end of day catch-up process, which helps you to understand that. And I guess we already have quite a lot of trust in the team in that regard. But I think it's a really interesting one in terms of how do we understand where people are and how do you bring flexibility. Once we went into lockdown, we had staff working different hours due to parental needs, so we had to run in a really different fashion than we normally would, where we've got a concentrated time between 10 and 4 was always our core time, and we allowed flexibility outside of that. But we've had people working weekends rather than working in the week. We've had people working evenings rather than in the day, and you've got to put a lot of trust into the team in order to support that, but also know that everyone understands where they've got to get to and the delivery times that we need to be able to do. So it's a very different way. And I think the other side is just it's bringing visibility. So the other challenge of that is where people have issues, then there's no one there to be able to support them if they're doing that at a weekend. So suddenly it's about kind of making sure that we can have conversations at the right points in order to help each other and support each other rather than feeling very much alone in that process.
So tell us about some of the underpinning points about essentially why you are in business and what you seek to do. And I want to touch on both, and they overlap, but they're quite separate. Tech with purpose and tech for good. Why does each matter?
So I'm a firm believer, and Ojo is as well, that the technology is out there to really do two very simple things. One, make our lives easier, and make the world a better place. And I think technology needs to be able to do that, and good technology needs to be able to do that. And it may not seem like that sometimes when we're slave to emails and other things, but it very much is a world of why it exists and its purpose. And why does that matter? Well, I think there's a lot of organizations out there and a lot of people out there who are disadvantaged in many ways. And technology allows us to level the playing field, allows us to do things that we couldn't do before and give them access. And that could be a voice, that could be access to a service they could never get to. Imagine if in the COVID world, if we didn't have technology, how would we engage with people? How would we have dealt with our distant relatives that we can't talk to because they're isolated? Or how would we actually have these types of conversations? You know, technology is very much an enabler. And if we can put a positive position onto that and actually use it for a force for good, actually impact and do better things in the world, then I think it's going to serve better for all of us. And you've seen that, you know, the narrative COVID around AI was one of, you know, artificial intelligence is the death of all of us, and it's a terrible beast, and it's been now shown to be a fantastic enabler in supporting us in terms of responding to COVID and supporting in good ways.
Isn't there, in a sense, a sort of sad paradox that the idealism that you're expressing, which is you know admirable, and many in the tech space particularly have that sense of wishing to make the world a better place. But the paradox is that with some tech company, as they've got bigger, so they've forgotten those roots. So Google founded with the phrase "do no evil." Facebook and its original genesis as a genuinely a form of socializing a network. Amazon, I mean, in multiple cases, companies have departed so far from their roots, and they're using technology to enrich themselves way disproportionately, far more so than you know the great 19th century robber barons or whatever the economy then. How do you reconcile that sense of tech having the idealism, but at the same time, its iterations in many cases are actually quite antithetical to that?
I think it's a really interesting challenge back in terms of where I think technology can go, and when you kind of end up in the big tech world. I mean, is that really technology for good, or is that just an aspiration in order to make it feel good for shareholders? You know, I think there's a lip service in there. You know, was Facebook ever in a good place? If Facebook was, then I think the way that Facebook would have been built would have been very different, and its purpose would have been very different. But is there an opportunity for Facebook to be good? I think the opportunities are definitely there, and the things that they do as a platform to help and support organizations, whether it's through Facebook Giving and other things that they have there, you know, is a fantastic opportunity. But I do think, you know, there's a point where we need to step back and be real about what that might mean. And I think also challenge them, you know, the likes of, as we saw with the Googles and Amazons and Facebooks that were recently grilled in the US Congress. You know, it's kind of fascinating to see where they are, and you know, some of those have real value still and have values behind them, and I think the rest of them have been bought out and sold into sort of a wider world, which I think is out of control now.
So tell us about your own methodologies when you have a start point of wishing to help companies develop. Of course, you need, like any business, to get your commercial value, but you have an overarching sense of technology has a sense of purpose and do good. Talk us through that, the transformation process. Just pick a client or two, if not named, but by sector. How you've approached the transformation, given your start point in terms of your thinking and your values.
Yeah, so I think if I take a local one, so credit union we're working with at the moment, which is a Southwest credit union. And so what attracted us to it was really the challenge of how can we eradicate payday lending using digital? How can we help them to do that? That's the challenge that we're taking on, and that's the kind of the impact that we want to understand. So for us, it's about understanding their problem, mapping that through, so understanding their digital objectives, and then beginning to make sense of a solution. So in their world, they've got a basically a database that used to be running on Access that's been transformed now into some sort of SQL database, which is awful. They waste a lot of time using manual processes and spreadsheets and all sorts of things to transform in order to understand whether or not they can give someone credit or not. And so it's a very cumbersome, slow process. At the front of that is a website which is not SEO friendly. It doesn't help the end user. If you're a bit slow and you haven't got the information you need at the time when you're filling it in, it logs you out and you have to start all over again. And the user experience is awful in that it's what would be a 5-page A4 form is in one very long formatted form, which if you don't know what you're looking at, is quite confusing. And if digital's not your first world, people like ourselves, we live day in, day out in digital. Most people don't. And if you're looking at these things, it's really confusing. So I challenge you to understand that and then basically build together a solution that helps them. So their objective was, we want to lend more, we want to be able to offer more, and we want to deal with some of the challenges in society around people who don't have access to credit and avoid them going to things like payday lenders, but also give access to credit for people who are homeless, the unbanked, and be able to do those things. And how can digital do that? So that is about integrating in technologies that allow us to automate credit decisions, allow us to know you're a bona fide individual, and then using tools like open banking, which is this strange thing that's come out that not many people kind of use or trust in, but actually allows us to understand something about an individual.
Could I just plead complete ignorance?
Yeah.
And say it's on behalf of everyone else. It's actually on behalf of me.
Yeah.
Tell us what open banking is and its application and possibly limitations.
So unfortunately, it's a not very user-friendly piece of technology. But what it essentially does is allows an organization like this credit union to be able to access your banking record. So you provide it with access into your banking. And by doing that, we're allowed to, if you like, make some assessments of what's going on. So in this case, we can assess and confirm you are who you say you are. We can also assess your income and your expenditure, but also we can understand whether or not you have anything else going on in your bank account which might cause concern. So, you've got heavy gambling, or you have other payday lending loans, or that actually, really importantly, actually by live access to that, we can understand whether or not you're likely to not to be able to meet your payment debts this month. So rather than people constantly defaulting, actually help them by informing constantly through that. So how you can help people to gain a better credit rating as well. So it's basically giving another party access to your bank account. Right. And that sounds scary. They can't write anything. All you can do is read. You can only read what's in there. So it's no different than probably passing over your bank account statements every month to someone. It's just doing that in real time to make sense of that.
Okay, so also tell us about when you're thinking about clients and the sectors you may wish to go into, and alternatively, some of it is just simply inbound, you're never quite sure what's going to emerge. Are there areas or types of businesses which you wouldn't take on because they don't fit with your aspirations and your values? Perhaps talk about that process.
Sure. So we have a very strong red line around anything to do with tech that's causing direct harm. So we won't work with anything in areas which could be to do with addiction areas, so gambling, those sorts of areas, but also anything to do with the military and defense, where we feel that kind of technology is not really serving a better purpose there. So there's some kind of key red lines where we won't really touch them at all. In terms of where it gets a little bit grayer is where you're working with organizations down supply chains, and so you're trying to understand actually how it's going to be used. And the converse of that really is that we look at technology to understand it in a decision point with a client would be based on one, whether it's something we want to do because we think that what they're doing is interesting. So does it excite us? Two, could the application of that be used in a different way? So from that project, can we learn something and can we apply that into the not-for-profit space? So for example, we had a bunch of work we've been doing in the AI area. We've been able to actually deploy that then into the charity area. And so we're kind of leveraging the commercial and then applying that into the not-for-profit in a way that they wouldn't be able to afford that. And the third bit, obviously, is it commercially viable to do that? And is that logical for us to be able to do? But some of those areas, we kind of work across the globe. And so also making sure that where we are overseas, that the things that they're doing overseas are okay as well. And that applies to charities as well. Charity by name and charity by organisation is also really something which is key for us.
We'll come back to the charity point in a second. We've had an interesting question on that. But Joe, just back to this point about the values framing the decisions. Do you find that, or do you think that as a limiter of the business you might do, or as an enabler, because it's a highlighter of your approach?
Sorry, can you repeat that last bit? Sorry, I didn't hear you.
Yeah, is it having this approach where you say there are certain red lines or whatever? Is that an inherent limiter because they're off limits, or is it an enabler because it will encourage other companies to potentially use your services?
Yeah, I believe it's an enabler for us. I mean, I think most people will have the limits of what their business is about and what it is not about. And for us, we are very much about tech with purpose and tech for good. So it is about making a difference to people, their lives, and tech making it easier. So for us, it's around, what does that mean to your business? And if your business, is in need of a digital solution, and you want to become more visible online, and you want to make the most of that opportunity, for me, that really does, it says what we're trying to help people do. We believe that, we can help business, we can help people, society, make things easier through technology. So for me, that's a big enabler. And I think once people start to see some of the projects that we've been doing, some of the work we've been doing with different types of organisation, be that charity, retail, we've worked with some very strong HR and employment-based businesses as well. It's around how do you help them do good for their own purpose, wherever that sits. I think that ethos comes across. And from our own perspective, our values are very much, we go into projects with our eyes wide open. We love to make space for people to be creative and really think about where they'd like to be. What is their vision and how do we help them to get there? And I think all of the projects we've done, whichever sector they've been in, and whether they're a website or an app, we take the same approach and we use the same values. So I think all of those things very much put across to any kind of organisation. That's a great transparent way to work. And actually it's about getting to where they want to be as a business and helping the people that they in turn help.
One of the observations about this great pause is one, it has given people the opportunity to be contemplative, to think more deeply about why they do what they do, but also two, to accelerate pre-existing trends that in a short time, there's been a huge step forward, including, for example, using these Zoom conferences. Do either of you think that sense of purpose which there is being articulated in business, is that becoming baked in? Is that becoming fundamental? Or is this simply a bit more than lip service that people wish to believe it or wish to be seen to believing it and so on? Are companies actually changing that sense of value? You're clearly in a very different place to many, but are they seeing that are you seeing that sense of purpose amongst clients themselves?
Yeah, so one of the things I'd follow, so one of our clients, I act as their interim CTO, and they're a talent insight business. And one of the things that we found really excitingly and interestingly, exciting for them as a business and interesting in terms of this area, is that we've really noticed that where, for example, continuity planning would be about your buildings and your IT infrastructure, suddenly people are absolutely at the fore and core of that and how we want to be able to work, but also in considering the future of work and the narrative around that, actually understanding the impact of well-being and well-being being at the center of what we think about now, rather than I think mental health being a sort of, oh yes, it's something that we need to add on to the tick mark type approach. Actually, if you're actually really thinking about that and the impact and understanding what that means, and I think a lot of organizations now go, actually, we need to rethink how we work. Do we really need to operate in a 9-to-5 way in the way that we normally would? And actually really genuinely challenge that, because I think everyone has got a real different sense of purpose in terms of how they like to be able to work, but also I think they all have a voice now, and a voice where perhaps they didn't have before because it was the norm to be on this 9-to-5 way. You go to office, you do what you need to do, and then you come home. Actually, that's really been changed by COVID and been proven in the greatest experiment you could have. that it can work at a global scale, and that actually it doesn't inhibit any productivity. I would argue actually increases productivity, and that you can create much greater flexibility in the way that we think about work.
To pick up one of the underlying points there, there's a quote from Rupert Murdoch, and he isn't someone I ordinarily quote, honest. And this goes back to an earlier time of probably the second dot-com boom, but if anything, it applies more so now. In the new economy, big may beat small, but faster will beat slower. Are you seeing that with clients, the ability to pivot quickly to new opportunities? Are companies capable of being nimble if they've been around for 10, 20 years or some such?
Yeah, I think it's interesting actually, that one. So noticed during lockdown, actually, it was the smaller businesses that wanted to use this time to accelerate, use this time to work effectively, to rethink and go, to recognize that actually we need to come out of this stronger and better. And it was all the big businesses. We work with some quite large multi-internationals that basically cut budgets. So we're not touching anything. We don't want to know until we decided to come back. And then they're the ones that are now going, oh my God, we need to do something. We need to do it now, and are screaming to be able to move forward. But they're too slow. They take forever. They've got it's too bureaucratic. Everything around it is just not agile enough. And I think, we've seen that with the banks, and I think they're a great example of that. The chaos that came with the first round of funding that came from the banks during COVID. And then the second round was kind of, we're going to do this in a much better way. So I think we can see that you can pivot very fast, and you can deliver things in very different ways when you get the right mindset behind it.
Yeah, and I'd echo that from if you're a business who are really focused upon the people you serve, your customers, sponsors, patients, if you've listened to them and you've really taken on board what they need, actually you tend to make the right decisions and do the right things for them. So as Nathan says, a lot of the smaller businesses who are able to have those conversations quite easily have been able to really, be quick and adapt what they are doing quickly. They've been able to virtualize themselves pretty quickly. And a lot of them have done that, at a pace that means that they've just got themselves online, and then they've taken learnings. They've carried on talking to all of their sort of end users, their customers, their clients, their patients, and they've made the experience better and better over time, and they'll continue to do so. I think that's so key, because that's where you make the difference. And it's those smaller businesses that are very nimble, very agile, and very able to make changes around their offer and what their customers need. And as the world changes again, at some point we will come back to having a bit more of a physical as well as virtual world. Those businesses that are able to adapt to that scenario will do really well. And it's about keeping in touch with the people that you're serving. Keep the conversation going, understand what their needs are, understand when those things change, and change with them, and give them the best experience you possibly can.
In terms of understanding needs and the need for change, probably one of the sectors that's been most deleteriously hit is the charity sector. One, it's the requirements of its services more generally have rapidly increased for obvious reasons. But two, the funding has just disappeared overnight for many charities. So I wanted to bring in a question from Katrina Logut. Sorry if I've mispronounced your last name. I'd love to hear how you've helped a charity digitally. For us, it's connecting with our supporters and fundraising virtually. Perhaps give a specific example, if you can, but again, without breaching any confidentialities, about how you've worked with a charity in these times.
Sure. So I think probably one of the most pertinent ones was with Cerebral Palsy Cymru, who previously known as Bobath Wales. And we've been working with them to help them to understand their digital journey. So, not particularly large team. They obviously supporting children with cerebral palsy and supporting that through holistic treatments. And also as a charity, they are absolutely key in terms of their funding. So everyone would think for them, their challenges, everyone thinks they're part of the NHS. They're not. They're fully, pretty much 75p of every pound is charitable giving. And 25p is state funded. So it gives you an idea of their proportion of what they need in order to support. And we've been working with them to make sense of where they need to go. We then started a project just before lockdown to help them to rebrand and rename to Cerebral Palsy Cymru, and also deliver a digital platform in order to support their needs. And as we went into lockdown, they were concerned about not only the funding, but also the perception. So, you know, we've just been hit and kind of what should we be doing? And our view is kind of actually, this is the most important time ever that you need to be engaging digitally with your stakeholders and getting people engaged with what you're doing. But also they needed to be able to continue to consult. They need to be able to do that in a really quick way. So just helping them to understand the likes of a Zoom and how you can use that securely to help them to have the conversations they need to be able to do so they can continue working and operating, but also get themselves into a position where they can continue to fund. So we actually deployed their website faster and their rebranding faster than anticipated in order to just get that out there and launch that at the early May bank holiday, and also launch a virtualized campaign with them. So help them to think about, you know, you can't do this by bringing all the people together. You know, it's a very family orientated organization, and then we would have done this through a physical picnic or some way of bringing a, you know, the end of sort of a virtualized bake sale is basically what they ended up doing in order to support that, and just being able to do that in a positive way, but get their story out there, get their brand right, and then start to really enable them to digitally deliver on their fundraising. And for us, that practically came down to, you know, in technological terms, giving them a donation platform that actually works and can drive that, to having a platform which is SEO friendly and can enable them to move forward. And thirdly, position themselves as a well-defined, respected charity and bring that forward. And if you look at their old site to their new site, you know, the biggest difference is we brought the people that they support to the fore. And it's a really simple picture change of, they had images of clinical people doing clinical things. So here's a picture of a child. Everyone wants hope. Everyone wants that need, but actually they need to be able to talk about that in a really different ways, and changing that narrative is absolutely critical. So the narrative plus the functionality has really kind of bolstered them to step forward. But yeah, funding is such a challenge for all charities at the moment, and such a big impact in what they do. And for us, we do that also by then donating. So we donate a huge amount of time in those projects to enable them. So in that project, kind of donated 10% of the build cost was from us straight in to help to make that happen and make that happen right.
It's really good to hear. I mean, it's back to your point earlier about tech for good, and you have the capability. Any technologist has the capability to do good stuff, and you're demonstrating it there. But tell us a bit more about that functionality point. That I don't know what proportion of your business is app based, but there was a sense with apps maybe 5+ years back, the gathering rush that everyone had to have an app. They were cool. It was the way forward, and so on. I don't know about you, but certainly for me, my phone is full of apps that I've looked at once or twice and I've never got around to deleting. Why should companies, in what circumstances should companies genuinely choose to have an app, and when have you advised companies not to bother?
I think it's a really interesting position around that, because I think 2 years ago, even 3 years ago, you know, we would spend a lot of conversations with people coming, I want an app. And then the first question is, why do you want an app? And you go through the process, say, that's not an app. So I think the biggest barrier and the biggest question anyone needs to ask themselves is, if you put an app into the App Store, someone has to want to go and download it. That's the first barrier to any app development, is I need a desire and a need to go and do that. And actually, it's a lot of marketing effort to get an app working in the way that you want and have that mass participation in that app. So why does it need to be there, and why do I need this app on my phone? What is the functionality that I might be getting over and above just having a website? So 9 times out of 10, we would always advise that actually a web app, if you like, so a web enabled, so a glorified website, if you like, with some features around the outside, will deliver as much as the app will need to do. But the technology landscape is changing a lot. So where you would have to have, I guess, 10 years ago, Flash was like the thing that everyone wanted and was very expensive. Apps are a bit like that. And that's been changing and moving much more into a digital web-enabled space. And what that means is it's a lot faster and cheaper. So in essence, what ordinarily would be a website, you can transform into an app and make that fully digitally enabled on a phone and get all of the features that you want. So normally it'd be kind of, I need a camera. Well, actually you can do that using the web now. I want push notifications. You can do that using the web. and those technologies are coming more and more synonymous together, and that helps massively in able to deliver that. But as anyone that's been reading the news, and any digital news will be here, is kind of the world of Fortnite trying to take away the need for the app stores. It's a fascinating space. The other side of that is if you've got an app that needs to be commercialized, you have to pay the Apple tax in doing that as well. So it's kind of actually, what is the best option for you in terms of delivering that solution back to your customers? But it definitely has a need.
The Fortnite story is a very specific one, but on a mass scale. One of the biggest games in the last 10 years. Epic are trying to circumvent the tariff they would otherwise have to pay to Apple and Google. That's slightly different from the area in which you're operating. People are operating here. But I just want to come back to that point about apps. So that, is it the case that the technologies are essentially blurring, and even the concept of an app the tide is going out on it? Is that fair to say? Or
yeah, I would definitely say. We would talk about apps being anything from a web site that has features and functions within it, all the way through to a physical install of something, either on a desktop or onto a mobile device of some sort. But the technology behind that, so what used to be kind of your iPhone or your Android device app to your desktop, whether that's Windows or Apple, are now very much the same technologies, and they're blurring. So before, where you'd have to have 5 different apps deployed into 5 different places, actually can just become one. And that's really important in that consideration. But also, most people still use the browser as their default. So actually, how do you then bring that application onto the desktop? So you might notice often if you're browsing a certain site and actually says, would you like to add this to your home screen? And things like that. So you're actually just driving the app into a place where it makes it easier for people. And that's a much more cost-effective way of getting to the position of actually we have all those things. And yeah, I did an experiment 2 years ago where I actually moved all of the apps I don't use onto a second screen and third screen on my phone. And only the apps that I use day to day, I have on one screen on the front of my phone. And I turned on the disable apps if I don't use them for a period of time. And slowly but surely, all of the apps on all those other screens are just disappearing because I don't use them. And it's actually that kind of point of, we end up with lots, but actually we don't use them, and there's not really much purpose. I think the only area where apps are still very much strong is in the gaming industry, where you need the native application to be able to do that well.
If by any chance anyone thinks I've ever so slightly suggested that apps may not have a huge purpose, I would at this point like to flag the fact that Ojo, in conjunction with Rocket Makers, will be developing a Bath Bool app, which is due to have been in place this year, but it's been postponed for fairly obvious reasons. But in that respect, definitely, apps are great. We really like apps, and we're looking forward to seeing what you and Rocket Makers, good friends in both cases, come up with. Joe, I want to come back to you that any company with a professional service, and this obviously is, will have issues of articulating their expertise because the language and thinking is inevitably different from what the clients that they're dealing with are using. So, for example, the clients listening to this may not simply just understand the framework of technology that you're operating in. How do you seek to convey an expertise which isn't alienating by using terminology which people just don't quite understand?
Yeah, it's a very good point. I'm not a technical person myself. I mean, I work with a team of techies, as everyone would like to call them, who talk in a particular language, I guess, to some people that they don't understand. So it is about ensuring that you put things into a language that people will understand. Now, obviously, if you're building, for example, a website, and you need to have certain things in there that help you to be searchable, so that your SEM and your SEO marketing, there you go, a bit more terminology that people will or won't understand. So how you make yourself visible and how you make yourself searchable, you need certain language, certain words that will enable that. Now that can be built into the back of your website, into your, and how you tag your website and how you make yourself visible. But actually, in terms of what you're putting in front of people who you want to be prospective clients or who are your current clients, you absolutely need to use a language that they understand. And again, for us, we're dealing with people who in some cases are very technically, languaged, and they speak in very technical terms and they understand the technical world. And some people who really don't. They don't have any, tech understanding, tech knowledge, and that's why they rely on a business like Ojo to help them to navigate through this whole area and speak to them a language that they understand. So for us, it's about, really appreciating who we're talking with, who we're dealing with, and making sure that that balance is there and we speak in the right language. And on the outside world for us, as we said already, we know that we've got to, change the way that we're working and adapt how we're marketing to the outside world. That physical, ability through networking and conferences, is not there at the moment. It'll come back. So we have to really look at what we're doing online and digitally. So again, we're having to think about the language and the people that we're talking to and how we're going to appeal to them and ensure that they understand exactly, what we do, how we do it, and does that fit with them as a business. So yeah, it's very much around, making sure that our content is right and that we're using the right wording so people fully understand what this is about.
And to pick up some of those threads of how to reach markets, how to communicate, how to pivot. I'll say it just perhaps parochially from Media Clash's point of view, when it comes to our physical awards, when they return at some point in 2021, we are very likely to have a combination also of digital with that. So you get the extra reach, which we found with our experience with big awards we had in Cardiff a few weeks back, and we'll be having in Bristol shortly, that it just opens up a different channel entirely, and you play that channel sort of, as sensibly as you can for the benefit of, in our case, of sponsors, but for the promoting of business, and all businesses are having to learn how to pivot. I want to ask you both about the point of digital transformation, of course, that it just never stops. Technology is sort of voraciously changing, that the entry points are fairly low, even for new startup tech businesses and so on. What about disintermediation from your point of view as a company, that everyone, pretty much anyone can make a film, they can write content, create a website, pretty minor one perhaps, build a social media profile. So how do you stay salient, and how do you also, if not quite justify your costs, but explain why using this approach as opposed to the happenstance that many have stumbled into in digital times have been operating? Disintermediation of Ojo itself, how about that?
So I think it's a really challenging point, particularly in a world where low-code technologies or no-code technologies are coming more and more the fashion and are there. So actually, I can enable things through almost low-touch or no-touch activity. So I don't need a coder because the code is taken away from that. But actually, what we're about is understanding the experience. So anyone can go and grab a WordPress site and stick a template in it, or a Shopify site, and they can stick a template in it and off they go. And that world is there, and that's there to meet a certain type of need. And it has a place. And I think this point, we have people come to us and ask for a website, and you could just do that yourself. Based on your budget, do it yourself. You don't need someone else. What we can do is help you to create the right type of design if those templates aren't right for you. And that's where the added value comes in. The bit for us is about the user experience. So most organizations just go, I need a website, or I need an app, or I need a CRM, or I need this, and they just go and grab something and then stick it in. What they'll find is either it won't be used for what they want, it will fail, or it won't meet its need in 2 years' time, because they haven't thought about actually the purpose of what they're trying to do. So good example, actually, and go back to the point before around charity. So with Wiltshire Ambulance, a local charity to here, who still needs support, they were just trying to get sense of how they can use their website better as a channel. They're fed up of the fact it doesn't work. But actually what they were missing was they needed a CRM system behind it. It's not the website's problem, it's the CRM. The website can deal with anything you want it to do, but if you don't have the CRM, you haven't got the customer experience and you haven't got the engagement, the loop back in. So the consistency for us is about user experience and also the digital solution as a whole. We're able then to join those two things together and deliver a much more coherent solution back to them. That's the added value in those areas. And I think it's kind of making sure that actually all the time going back to actually, why are you doing this in the first place and what are you trying to achieve? For us, once we've built something, it's very much about handing it back to the business. So we would advocate that people need to upskill their own teams in order to do things. We don't want to sit there taking people's money to be able to do things that anyone could do. So, content management systems and other things are there designed to do this. So we should make it as self-helpable as possible. but often the things that need to be knitted together to make that solution right for that client aren't necessarily things that you can just grab off the shelf and make that seamless in that way. And I think, you see that with charities, they'll go grab some donation platform, and then you're sort of on one website, and then you go to another website. And the biggest drop off in that is the fact that you're being shunted from one user experience into a completely different one. And that's either, do I trust it? Where have I now landed in this strange looking website that's not even mobile friendly and looks horrible? Or it's too complicated. Actually, I was just on my phone. I've got 5 minutes and I really wanted to donate. You've now made me fill in 15 forms and I don't want to now. I'm bored. I'm going to turn off. So it's finding those channels and being able to do that in the right way and actually create that correct user experience seamlessly in the way that you need to. And that for us is where it comes to. But it's a bit like home improvement though. We can all do some good decorating and we can do some DIY and put some shelves up. But, if you're restructuring your roof, you probably want to have a go at it yourself. You'd want to make sure that you've got a structural engineer in there and supporting that. And that's the same. You can do the decorating, you can do the home furnishing, but actually there's points where you want to make sure you've got professionals supporting that and helping you to make sure you get the right bit in place.
And even then, only up to a point, because you can do home decorating, and but if you haven't, which some may not have, quite the aesthetic taste or sensibility or something, you do need a professional. But I guess it's difficult to communicate the need for professionalism in what is still a relatively new area. I mean, companies are now onto their second or third or fourth iteration of websites if they've been around for a while, but many are still emerging into this digital world, and you haven't the advantages of, say, accountancy or law, which have got centuries worth of accreted value and practice and so on. So it's quite a challenge to communicate that, I guess.
Completely, yeah. So we would use, so normally in a strategic sense, so when we're having those dialogues at a high level, what are you trying to achieve? We use things like maturity models to make sense of that. So everyone is on a digital journey, to use a cliche, but actually where you are on that spectrum will mean different things for different organizations. So let's understand where you are in terms of your data. Where are you in terms of your strategic intent? Where are you in terms of your people skills? At the end of the day, behind most things still are humans, and those humans need to have certain capabilities in order to support that. But also, where are your systems and your processes? And when you start to have those conversations, people start to unlock and understand, actually, this isn't about just one thing. This is about lots of things being able to knit together, but also make sense of actually the how and then the outcome. And if we drive it on an outcome, there should always be a business benefit there. And therefore, whatever it is that our costs are should be hopefully massively outweighed by that outcome that you're trying to achieve.
Talk to us about Bath itself. One can make an argument that it's a fairly unlikely place to have smart tech, interesting businesses based, because it's known for its pickled-in aspic, Georgiana, and so on. You could also make a point that it's a less good place to be based because there are so many tech businesses. It's actually pretty competitive. How do you see Bath as a sort of a mini tech cluster, and the pros and cons of that for you as a business owner?
So I love Bath for the fact that there are lots of digital and creative and technology people in Bath and agencies around, and I think what that does bring is a sense of support. So I stand to colleagues at Rocket Makers are probably one of our closest competitors, if you like, but they're also one of our closest friends. And I think that's one of the things which is great about technology, is that we all come together in a positive way in order to support each other in the way to do things, rather than you're fighting and competing in that regard. Interestingly, I've never been in one pitch where I've been against the same organisation more than once. Which says something about the fact that there's such a variety out there in terms of what you're meeting and supporting. I think the other side is actually, well, the one thing about Bath is it's sort of its friendliness and its localness, and I think something about actually bringing together, and the great things with Creative Bath and being able to have the dialogues that we have in those conversations actually is about bringing diversity together to have some really unusual conversations and broaden your thinking and your horizons in many respects in terms of what's available. And I think Bath's really uniquely positioned. I came to Bath, I used to live in Bristol when I was growing up as a young lad, and I was living in London at the time when I came to Bath because I didn't want to go back to Bristol, but I was also commuting to London constantly at the time. So, it offers a really interesting position in terms of where it is geographically and its reach along the M4 corridor to be able to engage people, but also I think in terms of what people want from their career and what they want to see from an agency. So I think, yeah, it's a great place to be. It's not Bristol. That's for sure, and I think that's also a real positive. It offers its own kind of uniqueness in that regard. But as I say, at the moment we're based outside of Bath, in Bradford and Avon, and that's also fantastic for that. That sense of actually I can go outside and I'm in the countryside rather than I go outside and I'm stuck in a high-rise block or in a big city. I think that offers a lot for creativity. For us.
Yeah, that's probably of all that Bath has, it doesn't really have too many high-rise blocks, I guess.
Yes. Yeah.
Extra anonymity, albeit it will have the Keys project coming online reasonably soon. Joe, from your point of view, how recently did you come to the Bath area?
I've been in the West Country most of my life, apart from some phases of career over into London and even into Scotland. I've done a kind of triangular sort of journey around the country, but I've lived in the West Country for most of my life, Somerset and Bath. Particularly, I've lived now in the Bath area for the last year, 18 months, and Bradford and Avon recently now I've moved here. So I know this area very well. Being a rugby player in my past, I used to be at the Rec at the weekends, all the time in the season. So,
and when it comes to positioning and communicating about Ojo, is Bath a factor in how you're seeking to position the business and explain why people should connect with you? Is there a brand Bath from which you're benefiting?
Yeah, I think very much, as you say, the West Country, Bath, particularly now. Bristol has always been known for its, it's as being a bit of a tech hub, if you like, and it often wins awards for being so. And I think that is really beginning to take hold in Bath as well. And you put that with the creativity that's here, and actually that's the thing that most people are inspired by. I think it's about being creative, with your technology, and that's the thing I think Bath is beginning to, to really establish itself for. And I think businesses are beginning to recognise that as well. So yeah, it will very much play a part for us in the future. We're looking forward very much to, to continuing in this part of the world. It's very important to us, and the clients that we have, a lot of them are based around Bath and around Wiltshire and Somerset. So yeah,
you use the word about being inspired by that. That leads me to my last question, really, for you both. Where do you get inspiration? Where do you get your fresh thinking?
So technology never stops, and I think for me, our value set is one of them is really key, which is about always positively challenging and positively challenging ourselves. So we can't assume, we can't know it all, and take every project with a fresh pair of open eyes in order to make sense of what it is that client's trying to do. Being able to engage, and actually one of the things I love about COVID has been the volume of great events like this that have been made available for people, in terms of broadening that thinking, where before you wouldn't necessarily had that time to do that. Actually, something's going to become more and more, but keeping abreast of the latest, pushing the art of the possible is really key. So I spend a lot of time reading and exploring technologies that are out there and playing with things where we wouldn't normally have a chance to play. I think is really key in keeping that thinking fresh and different, but also knowing what works for organizations. There are some standard things that people should be doing that they need to be doing, and making sure that they're well embedded and well ingrained is absolutely key for us.
And how about for you, Joe? Where does your inspiration come from?
Again, I'm probably like most people. I love reading, keeping up to speed, and in touch with things that are going on around me. But a lot of the time it's people and their experiences. And I think you can take lots of learning from different parts of life, different sectors, and apply them to others. So for me, it's talking to people who are using what you're doing, your services, and ensuring that absolutely you're keeping relevant, and you're keeping engaged with that. So for me, yeah, it's very much about reading, listening, and just keep learning. For me, all of those things are so important, and that's where, I think people are, to me, probably the most inspirational.
Nathan, thank you. Nathan, one last for you, that technologists are sort of inherently optimistic. There's always something cooler, smarter, slicker, better, whatever, to be created out there. There's another world to conquer, there's new ideas and so on. Has COVID dented your sense of optimism, or are you fundamentally still the same optimist you would have been 9 months back?
I'm definitely not as much of a risk taker as I was pre-COVID. I believe if we can, we should, is the sort of mantra that we'd go with. And now I would say we can, we should, and let's just check that that's not too much of a risk that we should be taking. Can technology solve the world's problems? In certain contexts, yes. Is there more smarter, exciting and fun things out there? For sure. But I think kind of, where we go and the way that we need to operate now is very much in light of the things like COVID are out there and they can really hurt us. Let's make sure that we're prepared for the future.
Really good. Well, time is against us. It's one of the guarantees of these sessions. There's always more to explore, but we're up within our hour now. So I would like to thank on your behalf Ojo Solutions today, to Nathan and Joe, of course. Thank you for your attendance, and for those watching on YouTube, I hope this does give you some help and some insight in how you may seek to navigate your own digital transformation. Look out for our other business surgeries. If you have a business service of whatever sort, professional advice in areas of business that can help others, please just get in touch. We can provide the platform to share that good thinking, and because we all need help one way or another navigating through these times. Thank you for your time this morning. This has been a Media Clash production, and this has been our latest Bath Life Business Surgery. Thank you. Bath together. Thank you. Cheers. Thank you both.